On Wednesday, we talked about the quarterbacks, the guys that always get all of the attention. But today, we're going to talk about the most important position to us fantasy players, the running backs. Happy Friday, it's Owen. Let's get into some honorable mentions. We're going to start here with James Conner. Whether if it's a backup quarterback, whether if it's Kyler Murray, James Conner's past production has been there, and it's going to continue to be there for the foreseeable future. The rushing upside also is going to be there, especially if Kyler is going to miss some extended amount of time. Miles Sanders, he just made the move over to Carolina. Frank Reich and them, they've built an amazing offense, talent-filled offense. Miles Sanders might be able to spread his wings and become an elite running back this upcoming season. David Montgomery, he's taking essentially the role of Jamal Williams of the Detroit Lions last season. If you guys forgot, Jamal Williams had 18 or 19 touchdowns last year for the Detroit Lions, setting their franchise record for a single season. David Montgomery is stepping in as Jamal is out the door. David Montgomery's in as a more talented back. He could take that role quite easily. I don't think he'll pull up 18 or 19 touchdowns, but I think he could definitely be that touchdown merchant in there and steal a bunch of touchdowns from Jahmyr Gibbs in the red zone. Dameon Pierce, the hardest to leave off of this list in my opinion, but Dameon Pierce, he's going to be looking for that second-year jump, a guy that in an offense that doesn't have many stars, doesn't have much competition to take away touches from Dameon Pierce. We should easily be looking at a heightened volume this season with easily over 220 plus touches for Dameon Pierce in that Houston offense. And speaking of the last honorable mention, a guy that made the move from Detroit to Philly in a trade, DeAndre Swift, without a doubt the most talented back they've had probably since LaShawn McCoy. But DeAndre Swift, he can catch the ball, he can run the ball, and we know Philly loves to run. DeAndre Swift is now that main back there, as his only competition is Kenneth Gainwell or I guess Boston Scott if the Eagles do play the New York Giants. At number 20, we're going to have Alvin Kamara. He's going to have the best quarterback play since Drew Brees retired. He's going to have Derek Carr, of course, this season. If Alvin Kamara is on the field, it's going to be Alvin Kamara. We know that. He's still an explosive playmaker, pass-catching upside with no real competition there in the backfield in New Orleans. We know he's going to be a low-end RB2, high-end RB3 for our fantasy teams. But the negatives here with Alvin Kamara, we know his suspensions are looming. His incidents at the Pro Bowl 2 seasons ago may cost him some games this upcoming year. We know last year was a down year for him. You know, he's no longer that consistent 81 catch per year type of back. At least we don't think so. And you know, it showed last season. His target share dropped from 22% to 11% last season. And like I mentioned, he's going to be that low-end RB2, high-end RB3 just because of his suspensions and that they're looming. We don't want to draft a running back if he's not going to play for us. Plain and simple. Another guy that's in trouble and another guy that I believe would be higher on my list if his off-the-field issues weren't there. But Joe Mixon at number 19, his second half of the season last year, he was on pace for RB5 for the entire season, right? He was second in the league in carries inside the 10 with 28 of them. So the upside is there for, in the red zone. They love to run the ball and play it safe. Joe Mixon, he had a lot of those carries last year, and he just couldn't capitalize there in the red zone. His passing work is still going to be there. He averages nearly 4 catches a game for his career. He's a 3-down back. His only competition in the backfield is a young Chris Evans. And I guess Samaje Perine's out the door, so who knows? Mixon might get more of that pass work that Perine was getting last season. I will say the negatives. He is very wishy-washy. His first half of the season last year, he was the RB19. He could not find the end zone despite having those red zone carries. Again, his off-the-field issues are another thing to worry about. His suspensions are looming. Could he be suspended for 5, 6, 8 games, maybe even more than that? We don't know. And again, I don't want to draft a running back if he's not going to play for me. Number 18 is J.K. Dobbins. When he played last year, he showed flashes of an RB1 without a doubt, and that is without Lamar Jackson playing. And with that happening, he was still averaging 6.5 yards per carry. It is a historically run-heavy offense as Lamar re-signed his deal. We expect that to be the same. In the case that it is a more pass-happy offense with the new offensive coordinator that came into town for Baltimore, I can only imagine that he gets more passing work there, as we haven't really seen him get that passing work, and Gus Edwards is strictly a running back for them. Quite literally. He's a power back for them. They re-signed Justice Hill, but the number one, the alpha back in this backfield is J.K. Dobbins, and I believe he should be treated like that this upcoming season. And I guess the negatives we have to worry about is he's had 2 knee injuries the last year alone, right? That both left him out for an extended amount of time. So we have to worry about his health concerns. Can he be on the field and for an extended amount of games? We don't know yet. That's the risk you're taking if you draft a guy like this on draft day. With all that said, he's still an RB2 in my opinion. High-end running back 3. Number 17, Javonte Williams, one of my favorite personal running backs in the NFL just to watch. Not especially for fantasy, but just to watch. Very exciting back. Last year, he only played 4 games. He tore his ACL, PCL, and LCL last season in week 5 or so. But before the injury, he was only on pace for about running back 35. The offense we know in Denver was atrocious. There was no positives there for Denver last season. To make matters worse for Javonte going into this year, they did add Samaje Perine, which we just talked about, and that pretty much means that Javonte's not going to get a lot of pass work this season. And on top of that, I mean, Denver has been linked to trade for a running back we'll talk about here soon, but Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook has been rumored to be traded to Denver. Are those rumors going to come to fruition? And if they are, Javonte's not going to be a fantasy relevant running back for us in the 2023 season. But the positives. The O-line was addressed. It's going to be easier for Javonte to run, at least that's what we think, as Mike McGlinchey most notably was brought in from the 49ers. Sean Payton, we know he loves his running backs, whether if it was with the Saints early when he had Pierre Thomas and Reggie Bush and all them, to later on when he had Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. He loves to utilize every running back on his roster, and I believe with Javonte's skill set that is there's tons of potential. I believe he's going to be ready to take on that workhorse role here for the Broncos in 2023. He's an RB2 in my books, high-end running back 3. Number 16 for me is simple. It's going to be Aaron Jones, a guy that has finished as basically a top 10 running back the last 3 seasons. The positives here for Aaron Jones. Jordan Love, it's his first year as a starter. Young quarterbacks love to check down, whether if it's a big tight end or a reliable running back. The young quarterbacks love to get the ball out of their hands fast and efficient, and the running back or the tight end is the best way to do that. Aaron Jones, he's been a pass-catching monster for us these last couple years in fantasy. I believe he continues to do that, maybe even to a higher level this season. The passing work's still going to be there for Aaron Jones, and at the very least, I believe we know that A.J. Dillon, let's say this, we know that A.J. Dillon took a step up in that second half of the year. He was way more involved, especially in the red zone, which is not good for us fantasy players. But at the very least, I believe Aaron Jones will take all of the passing work while Dillon will take the running work, and he'll still be a very solid running back. It is a contract year for Aaron Jones. Will he play harder, or will they bypass him? Will they give more work to A.J. Dillon to mold him into that workhorse back and kind of push Aaron Jones to the side? Or will the Packers get the absolute most out of him? That's the question you have to ask yourself on draft day. That's the question I'm still asking myself. And with those questions, that's why he's RB16 for me. And that's why I believe he's at max in RB2, high-end RB3 here for us in 2023. Another questionable back, Dalvin Cook, a guy who finished number 2 in 2020, and this past year finished number 11. So he can be either the elite of the elite or still a solid running back 1. But he's the high usage. It's still going to be there in Minnesota. They still have Captain Checkdown, Captain Kirk Cousins, a guy that loves to get the ball out quick. But the offense is going to be more spread out than it has in the entire Kirk Cousins era. I believe with Jordan Addison coming into the mix, they still have TJ Hawkinson. They still have Justin Jefferson. So that is taking targets away from Dalvin Cook, but the field's going to be more spread out than it ever has. Dalvin Cook should be able to face less stacked boxes than he has. And this is his last year in Minnesota, most likely. Does Minnesota try and squeeze every last thing out of Dalvin Cook? I can see that, right? And the negatives here, though, for Dalvin Cook is last year he was only an RB8 despite having the 4th highest opportunity share in his offense. So that's something we got to worry about. But we also have to worry about Alexander Mattison and how he's got a new contract this past offseason. Dalvin Cook, I mean, do they try and use Alexander Mattison more? But if history tells us anything, right? Dalvin Cook's going to be the workhorse in this backfield unless he gets traded to a team like the Broncos where there is going to be a running back community there. Dalvin Cook should still be that solid running back 2 here for us in 2023. Moving over, Najee Harris, number 14. The O-line was addressed this offseason. They brought in a couple key pieces that I like, and Najee Harris, I mean, I'm super, super excited. I can't believe I'm actually ranking him this low. I believe when draft day comes, he will be in my top 10, maybe even top 8, right, pushing that mark. But Najee Harris, for me, despite his bad season last year, he was still 8th in total touches. He was the overall RB7 the second half of the season. He finished as the number 3 running back in 2021. In his rookie year, I might add, he was still 14 last year. So he was still borderline RB1 while having a bad season in most people's eyes. With Kenny Pickett as his quarterback, the passing work will always be there, as Kenny Pickett doesn't have the biggest arm in the world. He loves to take his efficient short passes to move the sticks. Najee Harris can be there to clean all of that up for us fantasy players. I believe he still is going to be that workhorse back that we love to see. He's going to be a high-end RB2, and I believe as of when draft day comes, I'm going to say Najee Harris will be a running back 1 here for our fantasy teams. Number 13 is Travis Etienne, a guy that from week 7 to 17 last season, he was the RB8 in points per game. He finished 5th in carries throughout the season within the 10-yard line at 23 total carries within the red zone, which we love to see, especially from a guy that's not necessarily a power back, right? But the team is committed to him. They committed to him even harder this offseason. They didn't draft or sign any real competition. Right now, his biggest competition is JaMycal Hasty. That is, I don't have to say too much about that competition, right? If there is any receiver in this offense that does go down, you can only imagine Travis Etienne's passing work goes up, whether if that's Calvin Ridley with another suspension, right? Or Christian Kirk or Zay Jones or even Evan Ingram. You can expect if any of those guys go down, Etienne will step up and take that extra passing production, and that's only going to help our fantasy teams here in 2023. The negatives, though, for Travis Etienne is Calvin Ridley. He's been added to this stacked receiving room. I think people quickly forget how talented Calvin Ridley is. He was a borderline top 10 receiver every year with the Falcons, and if he's anything of that, it's only going to hurt Travis Etienne and his upside here in 2023. Travis Etienne, for a guy that in college was a pass-catching back, his receiving work hasn't necessarily been there as expected in the NFL, but that's not expected to change. Like I mentioned, we need one of those receivers to go down for Etienne to take that next step. Another negative here is that he's already had 2 injuries in his young career. Can he stay healthy for a long period of time in extended weeks for our fantasy teams? That's something we have to worry about here. But Travis Etienne, tons of potential. Another guy that I can definitely see in anybody's top 10 here in 2023. Number 12, it's going to be the fantasy darling of last season for many, many fantasy teams. A guy that finished as the number 42 running back throughout 10 games, and he was on pace to be the number 7 running back on the season. Breece Hall, a guy who was a top 5 running backs in the 7 games that he did play last season. You know, he was averaging 6 yards per carry, and he was 4th in yards after contact. So for a guy that's more of a pass catcher, he could still get it done on the ground. Breece Hall was also ranked 4th in running back receiving yards with an elite 34% target share per route run, which is something that I don't look into a lot of advanced statistics, but that is one that I absolutely love. It's always interesting to see that when he is available to catch the ball, the quarterback is looking his way 34% of the time as of last season. But per reports, he's recovered faster than expected from his torn ACL injury last season. He's going to be back for training camp. Again, that's what we love to see. Oh, not to mention, this guy also has Aaron Rodgers now as his quarterback. Hall of Fame, first ballot type of guy who loves to check down. He loves his safety blankets. Breece Hall might be the most explosive check down option that Rodgers has ever had in his career. I believe that Breece Hall could be a low-end RB1, only because of his injury concerns. I believe if you're more confident that Breece Hall can stay healthy, he's going to be a top 8 running back for you in this 2023 season. But for me, Breece Hall, just because of the injury concerns, as of right now, I'm going to play it safe and rank him at number 12. The last guy I'm going to talk about today at number 11, it's going to be Rhamondre Stevenson, a guy that jumped up 40 spots and finished as the number 7 running back in 2022. The biggest positives here is Damien Harris. He's gone. He's out the door. What did they replace him with? James Robinson, who's had his fair share of injuries in his career. He's also older. James Robinson, he's not real competition. He's not a real threat here to Rhamondre's touches. He's not a real threat to our fantasy teams this season. Rhamondre's from week 5 through 16, he was the running back 13 in points per game. He was a running back 1 last season, despite being one of the worst at scoring within the 10-yard line. One of the worst at scoring within the red zone. With that being said, he's still an RB1, not being touchdown dependent, which is always something we love to see, that if he was number 7 without scoring these touchdown opportunities that he had, you can only imagine it goes up if he can find his way into the end zone a couple more times. He was also 3rd in targets among running backs in the league, so he can do it all. He can run, he can catch. He's going to be a solid running back 1 for us this season. Another one of those guys I can see as high as 6 or 7 in your rankings. The only negative here is Bill Belichick. He hates fantasy football. That's the only real negative I have here for Rhamondre Stevenson. Just to recap here, my number 20 through 11, we're going to start here at 20 in the bottom right of your screen. Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, J.K. Dobbins, Javonte Williams, if there's no trade for Dalvin Cook. And Aaron Jones is my 20 through 16. My 15 through 11 is Dalvin Cook, again, if he's not traded. Najee Harris at 14, Etienne, Breece Hall, and Rhamondre Stevenson. A lot of these guys are talented. A lot of these guys can come out and be a top 10 running back this season. For whether if it's just questions around their game or off the field, I just have some questions about these guys. I'm not as sold on these guys as I am on the top 10, and it really came down to that. But let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think down below about the rankings. That's going to do it for today's show. We're going to be back next Tuesday with another podcast here with my co-host, which if you guys haven't checked us out, go ahead and check us out. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we drop a podcast at 1 o'clock on the latest and greatest sports news. Anything from fan involvement shows or just talking about what's going on in the world of sports. We cover it all on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so check us out if you ever have some time. On these Wednesdays and Fridays, we're going to be having fantasy football content for the foreseeable future. So go ahead and subscribe, as eventually we're going to get a fan league together. But until Tuesday, have a great weekend. If your team is still in the NBA playoffs, good luck, and I'll see you guys on Tuesday.